There is a question that keeps forensic psychologists awake at night. Not the question of what someone did. The what asterisk is easy, the what is in the police report. The question that haunts them is this. At exactly what moment did a normal human being decide, consciously, deliberately, with full awareness, that another person's life was worth less than their own ego? Because here is something most people never consider. Killers are not born in the act of killing. They are built slowly, quietly, over years in the small moments no one ever sees, in the diary entries, in the late-night drives, in the way they look at someone they love and feel something far darker than love looking back. Most of them look completely ordinary. And some of them are the kind of person you would describe, if asked, as sweet. Welcome to Time with X. Today's story is about a woman named Jodi Arias. And if you know that name, you already know this is not an ordinary story. But here is what most people get wrong about Jodi Arias. They watch the trial clips, they see the crying on the stand, they see the manipulative answers, the bizarre behavior, the interrogation footage, and they think they understand her. They don't. Because understanding Jodi Arias is not about watching what she did. It is about understanding why, and more disturbingly, understanding how close to normal she actually was. She was not a stranger to her victim. She was not a random predator lurking in the dark. She was someone he knew, someone he trusted, someone who had been in his home, in his bed, and in his life for years. And that is the detail that changes everything. Because when a stranger kills, we can comfort ourselves with distance. When someone loved kills, that distance disappears entirely. This is not a comfortable story. It is the story of obsession, rejection, and the specific kind of psychological unraveling that happens when a person mistakes possession for love. It is the story of a crime that was photographed by accident as it happened. It is the story of one of the most extraordinary interrogations ever recorded, where a woman sat across from a detective and for hours tried to outthink a man who already knew exactly what she had done. And it is the story of what happens in a courtroom when a killer decides that the best strategy is to become the most insufferable person in the room. Stay with us, because the wrath of Jodi is only just beginning. On Wednesday, the 9th of July, 1980, at exactly 11:54 in the evening, a little girl named Jodi Ann Arias was born in the city of Salinas, California. Her parents were doting. Her childhood was unremarkable. Her neighborhood was ordinary. And that, in many ways, is the most unsettling detail of this entire story. Because when we look back at the early life of Jodi Arias through the lens of everything she would eventually do, forensic psychologists and criminal analysts find almost nothing. No profound trauma. No textbook trigger. No single moment that explains what came later. Her defense team would spend years trying to construct one. They would need one, desperately, before a jury of 12 people. But the evidence of a damaged childhood simply wasn't there, and the experts who looked for it came back largely empty-handed. The only detail worth noting from her early years is that Jodi dropped out of high school in the 11th grade. The reason she gave: a passion for photography. The result: a career that never materialized. By the time she was 26 years old, Jodi Arias was working as a salesperson for a network marketing company called Prepaid Legal Services, selling legal protection plans to anyone willing to listen, and doing so with the kind of relentless, surface-level enthusiasm that network marketing tends to attract. It was an unremarkable job. But it was about to produce a very remarkable collision. Because it was through Prepaid Legal at a business conference in September of 2006 that Jodi Arias crossed paths with a man named Travis Alexander. Travis was 28 years old, a practicing Mormon from Mesa, Arizona, a part-time motivational speaker with genuine charisma, a warm and magnetic energy, and the kind of presence that made rooms pay attention when he walked into them. Listen to him work a crowd. When you get so into the briefing they say no, that counts. When you get someone fully exposed and they say no, that counts. Every time you get one of those, cross one off the list. By the time the 100th one's crossed off, you won't be able to spend the money. He was electric. And Jodi noticed immediately. They met, they talked, they began what the script of this story would politely describe as a asterisk curious relationship. But here is the truth of what that relationship actually was, and this part matters enormously for everything that follows. Jodi was in love. Travis was not. They broke up after 5 months. And instead of walking away, Jodi Arias packed her belongings, left her grandparents' home in Eureka, California, and moved into an apartment exactly 2 blocks from Travis Alexander's house in Mesa, Arizona. 2 blocks. And that is where the story of Jodi Arias truly begins. Let's be very precise about what the situation in Mesa, Arizona actually looked like. Because the word relationship does not do it justice. From the moment Jodi Arias moved 2 blocks from Travis Alexander's front door, every single one of Travis' friends used one word to describe her. Stalker. Not informally, not behind her back. They said it to Travis' face repeatedly, and Travis agreed with them. He called her his crazy stalker ex in conversations with friends. He knew exactly what the situation was, he had a name for it. And yet, and this is a critical detail, he continued to let her in. Not because he loved her. Because it was convenient. Travis wanted to remain a faithful Mormon in the eyes of his community, his church, and his social circle. Publicly, he was a man of God, disciplined, principled, and preparing himself for a serious relationship with a serious woman. Privately, he was sleeping with Jodi Arias. She would show up unannounced, sometimes in the middle of the night, and Travis would open the door every single time, not out of affection, not out of love, out of a calculated convenience that he never made the mistake of disguising as anything more. For Jodi, however, this was something else entirely. She was not a woman enjoying a casual arrangement. She was a woman with a diary full of entries describing a love she was absolutely convinced was destiny. She believed, with a certainty that no amount of evidence could shake, that she and Travis Alexander were meant to be together. The result was a dynamic so dysfunctional that it defies easy description. Travis wanted her gone, but kept inviting her back in. Jodi wanted a future, but was being handed scraps of a present. And for a time, a long, uneasy, deeply unstable time, this arrangement held. Then in late May of 2008, it didn't. Travis had a company trip to Cancun, Mexico, fully paid for, departing July the 10th, and it allowed him to bring one guest. Jodi knew about the trip. And Jodi, based on everything she had written in her diary, believed she would be that guest. She was wrong. In the last week of May, it became known through the social architecture of their shared world that Travis was taking another woman, a devout Mormon girl named Mimi Hall. Someone Travis had been quietly, genuinely, romantically interested in for some time. He hadn't told Jodi. He hadn't needed to. They weren't together, he owed her nothing. But Jodi Arias was not operating on the logic of obligation. She was operating on something far more dangerous. And when she found out about Mimi Hall, something shifted. Something that had been building quietly in diary entries no one was supposed to read, in late-night drives no one was supposed to know about, finally moved in a direction there was no coming back from. Forensic psychology has a term for what happened next. It is called a asterisk cognitive permission structure. It is the internal process by which a person, faced with a situation they cannot accept, begins to construct a psychological justification for an action that they know on every rational level is wrong. It is not madness. It is not a breakdown. It is something colder than both. It is a mind quietly building the case for something that the heart has already decided. And the collective opinion of every expert, every analyst, every person who has studied this case in depth, is that this is exactly what began to happen inside Jodi Arias the moment she learned Travis Alexander was taking Mimi Hall to Cancun. 6 days before Travis was scheduled to leave for Mexico, on the 4th of June 2008, Jodi Arias showed up at his house in Mesa. Unannounced, as she had done dozens of times before. What happened inside that house in the hours that followed is known in careful detail, because Travis Alexander's camera captured it. They had sex. They took explicit photographs of each other. At approximately 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Travis got into the shower. and Jodi began photographing him. Frame by frame, the new camera, the man she had loved for 2 years, the man who was taking someone else to Cancun in 6 days. Then, moments after this photograph was taken, Jodi Ann Arias stabbed Travis Alexander 27 times. She cut his throat. She shot him in the face. And while all of this was happening in those violent, irreversible seconds, Travis's camera was still rolling. It took 2 photographs by accident. The first was captured as Jodi dropped the camera at the onset of the attack. The second was taken as she kicked it while moving Travis's body. That second photograph showed Jodi's foot and a fatally wounded Travis Alexander. The time stamp on those 2 photographs tells us everything we need to know about what happened in that bathroom. The gap between them from the moment the camera was dropped to the moment it was kicked was 62 seconds. 62 seconds. That is the entire window of time in which a 27-stab attack, a throat cut, and a gunshot to the face of a grown man were carried out. 62 seconds that Travis Alexander could not survive. Afterwards, Jodi Arias spent an estimated 45 minutes in that house. She wiped down the crime scene, she cleaned Travis's body with water and a cloth, she deleted the photographs from the camera, she put the camera in the washing machine. Then she got in her car, drove out into the desert, and left Travis Alexander a cheerful voicemail. Just to make sure her phone records placed her somewhere else entirely. Travis Alexander's body was discovered 5 days later. Not by police, not by a concerned neighbor, not by a family member who had grown worried. By Mimi Hall, the woman he was supposed to take to Cancun. She arrived at his house with a group of friends the day before they were all supposed to leave for Mexico together and found the front door locked. She knocked, she rang the doorbell, over and over, no answer. She would later describe that moment on the stand with the kind of quiet devastation that testimony like this always carries. She had known something was wrong, she had felt it. There was a man on the phone with her, one of Travis's friends, who suggested they try the garage, find a way in, look through the house. And then, within moments of entering, someone saw blood. There's blood everywhere. That was all it took. He's dead, he's dead. And just like that, 6 days after Jodi Arias drove away from Mesa, Arizona, the version of events she had so carefully constructed began its slow, inevitable collapse. Because Jodi Arias had made an error in her calculation. A fundamental one. She had cleaned the crime scene with extraordinary precision. She had deleted the photographs. She had washed the camera. She had constructed an alibi that placed her hundreds of miles away in Utah, where she had driven directly to the home of another man and spent the night, reportedly behaving as though nothing had happened at all. That man would later testify that Jodi seemed completely normal, that they kissed, that nothing seemed off. The error was not in the cleaning. The error was not in the alibi. The error was the camera. Because deleted photographs, wiped from a memory card by an amateur in a panicked 45-minute window, are not gone. They are simply hidden. And forensic data recovery does not care about hiding. Over the following weeks, investigators used forensic imaging to reconstruct every deleted file on Travis Alexander's camera. They recovered the explicit photographs. They recovered the shower sequence. And they recovered those 2 accidental images, the foot, the body, the timestamp. 62 seconds. At the same time, Jodi Arias was doing something extraordinary. She was posting on Facebook photographs of herself and Travis, dozens of them, alongside emotional messages addressed directly to him, as though she were grieving, as though she were just another heartbroken person trying to process the loss of someone she loved. She sent flowers to his family. She sent a letter expressing her grief. She even called the lead detective on the case, a Mesa Police Department investigator named Esteban Flores, and voluntarily offered to help. She provided a sample of her DNA. She handed them her DNA, voluntarily, while her bloody palm print was already drying on Travis Alexander's hallway wall. 41 days after the murder, the arrest warrant was signed. On July 15, 2008, 41 days after Travis Alexander was killed, officers from the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department arrived at the home of Jodi Arias' grandparents at 7:35 in the morning. They had an arrest warrant. They placed Jodi Arias in handcuffs. And they told her plainly, without elaboration, that she was under arrest. They did not tell her why. A standard procedure in circumstances like this: you inform the suspect of the arrest, you secure them, you transport them, the details come later. Here is what an innocent person does in that situation. An innocent person asks why. An innocent person, panicked, confused, certain this must be some terrible mistake, demands an explanation before they are even fully through the door of the police car. What is this about? What are you arresting me for? I haven't done anything. That is what innocence sounds like. In the 6-minute drive from her grandparents' home to the local police station, 6 full minutes in a car with law enforcement officers who had just placed her in handcuffs without explanation, Jodi Arias said nothing. Not one question. Not one word of protest. Not one flicker of confusion about why she was being arrested. She already knew. She was taken to the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office and placed in an interrogation room where she waited for Detective Esteban Flores, the same detective she had called weeks earlier to offer her help, to come and speak with her. And here, before we go any further into what happened in that room, it is important to understand something about Jodi Arias that shapes every single thing she did from this moment forward. Jodi Arias had a strategy. Not a legal strategy, not a defense attorney's strategy. Her own. She had decided, somewhere in the 41 days between the murder and this morning, exactly who she was going to be in this room. She was going to be soft-spoken. She was going to be sweet-natured. She was going to be a God-fearing, Bible-quoting, gentle young woman who couldn't possibly hurt anyone. She had a character, a fully constructed, carefully maintained character. And she was absolutely convinced that if she played it convincingly enough, maintained it calmly enough, performed it consistently enough, it would save her. The problem, the fundamental, catastrophic problem, was that Jodi Arias did not fully understand that this character she had invented bore absolutely no relationship to the situation she was actually in. She was a murder suspect. In a police interrogation room. With forensic evidence, deleted photographs, a bloody palm print, and a DNA profile already assembled against her. And she was about to walk into that room and behave like a woman who had misplaced her car keys. If you want to understand what psychological manipulation actually looks like in real time, in high stakes, stay right there. Before Detective Flores even enters the interrogation room, Jodi Arias gives the game away. She does not know she is being observed. She sits alone in the room, and in the moments before the detective arrives, she places her head down on the table. As though she is sleeping. Now, watch what happens next, because this single 30-second sequence reveals more about Jodi Arias than almost anything she would say in the hours that followed. She hears footsteps approaching the door. She lifts her head. She waits. The footsteps pass. The detective has walked by, he hasn't entered yet. And Jodi Arias, satisfied that she is still alone, sits back up and returns to her normal posture. Then she hears the outer door open. She places her head back down on the table. Takes a breath. Fully rests. Performs sleep. The detective enters. What she was trying to communicate is obvious once you know what you're looking for. She wanted Detective Flores to open that door and find a woman so unburdened by guilt that she had literally fallen asleep waiting for him. A woman so relaxed, so innocent, so untroubled by the situation that a police interrogation room had simply lulled her off. She was in a state of what psychologists call hyperarousal, every nerve firing, every sense on maximum alert, while performing the external presentation of a woman who could not have been more at peace. The performance lasted approximately 60 seconds before the detective sat down across from her. He told her he had been working Travis's case, that he knew a lot of details, that he had recently found quite a bit of evidence. He was calm, methodical, almost gentle. A lesser detective might have shown his hand immediately, slammed the photographs on the table, made the accusation loud and fast, and forced a reaction. Flores did the opposite. He let her talk. And Jodi, relieved by the non-confrontational tone, encouraged by the space she was being given, began to talk. She talked about her work history with prepaid legal. She talked about the market being untapped in her area, an opportunity really when you thought about it that way. She talked about Travis's Facebook memorial, about her new potential romantic interest, about how difficult it was to discuss an ex-boyfriend's death with someone you might be starting to date. She talked and talked and talked about everything except the one thing she was there to discuss. This is a well-documented phenomenon in high-stakes interrogation. Forensic psychology calls it a asterisk denial displacement mechanism, the suspect's mind generating verbal output on safe topics as a way of delaying contact with the terrifying reality of their actual situation. In simpler terms, Jodi Arias would rather explain network marketing to a homicide detective than admit she had been anywhere near Mesa, Arizona on June the 4th. Detective Flores was not interested in prepaid legal. With quiet, patient precision, the kind that is only possible when a man already knows the answer to every question he is about to ask, he began steering Jodi Arias back toward the thing she was trying to avoid. He asked about Travis. About the relationship, the dynamic, the breakup, the arrangement that had continued long after the formal ending of whatever they had been to each other. Jodi navigated this carefully. She was warm about Travis, generous. She described the relationship in gentle, spiritual terms, leaning heavily on the language of faith and scripture and mutual growth. She talked about prayer, about repentance, about the guidance of her bishop. And then she said something that should have been a small detail but was, in fact, a significant tell. She said she had been happy for Travis when she heard about Mimi Hall. She said he had shown her Mimi's photograph, on his laptop, in his room, that he had discussed his romantic interest in Mimi with Jodi directly, openly, warmly, as though they were simply two friends sharing good news. This was not credible. Travis Alexander had told his friends, repeatedly and explicitly, that Jodi was a stalker. He had called her that. He had been trying to extract himself from the situation for months. The idea that he would sit in his bedroom with the woman he was trying to get rid of and enthusiastically discuss the woman he actually wanted to date is not something that survives basic scrutiny. But Jodi said it confidently, as though she believed it entirely. Then Detective Flores leaned in. Gently, still gently. He told her that a lot of people kept pointing a finger in her direction, that everyone he spoke to, Travis's friends, his family, his colleagues, kept saying the same thing. I don't know who killed him, but you need to look at Jodi. And then he said something that was not quite an accusation, but was very deliberately not nothing either. He told her about the trip to Cancun. He confirmed that Mimi Hall had politely and firmly placed Travis in the friend zone, that Travis had still chosen to take Mimi instead of Jodi. He watched her face. Jodi maintained composure, described not finding out about the Mimi situation until Travis's memorial service, said she was happy for him. Pay attention to what the detective is doing here, because this is the architecture of the entire first interrogation. He is not going for a confession. He is building a record. Every statement Jodi makes, every alibi she constructs, every emotion she performs, every timeline she lays down is being placed on paper, in sequence, under oath, so that when the photographs come out, when the DNA comes out, when the palm print comes out, she has already told the story that she cannot now take back. She is digging, and Flores is handing her the shovel. Detective Flores moved the conversation to Jodi's road trip. The one she had taken in the first week of June. The one that, according to her, had taken her from California through Nevada, through Utah, and back again. A long drive, a solo drive, a drive she had taken, she said, to visit a man in Utah named Ryan Burns. The detective had a map. He had the cell phone records. He had 41 days of careful, meticulous analysis of every number called, every tower pinged, every geographic data point that Jodi Arias' phone had left behind on that trip. And he had a problem with the maths. He laid it out with the patience of a man who had rehearsed this conversation in his head many times. The route she described didn't make sense. The timing didn't work. Even accounting for sleep, even if she had stopped for hours, even if she had got lost, even if everything she said about the journey was true, There were still 18 to 20 unaccounted hours in a window that placed her phone suspiciously dark in exactly the region she was claiming she had never entered. Her cell phone had been turned off, she explained. Not turned off physically, it had simply died. And then, miraculously, when she was stranded somewhere, she had found her charger. Under the seat. On the passenger side. She hadn't been able to find it when she was lost, she said, but once she was stranded, somehow she looked and there it was. Detective Flores looked at her. He did not say, "I don't believe you." He said, "The timeline doesn't work." And Jodi Arias, rather than confronting the timeline directly, responded with something that will become a recurring pattern in everything that follows. She acted confused. Not defensively confused, not angrily confused. Quietly, gently, almost sweetly confused, as though the concept of time and distance were slightly abstract to her, as though a map were a foreign language she was trying to translate in real time. She said, "I honestly just got lost, it's bad timing." She said, "I wasn't anywhere near Mesa, I wasn't anywhere near Phoenix, I wasn't even close." Detective Flores looked at her for a long moment. And then he said, "What if I could show you proof you were there?" And Jodi Arias said, "Oh, that changed my mind, I wasn't there." Read that exchange again. What if I could show you proof you were there? She didn't ask what the proof was, she didn't ask what he meant, she didn't say, "Well then I'd need to see it because I know I wasn't there." She said, "That changed my mind." As though the existence of proof, any proof, was sufficient to alter her memory. As though her certainty about her own location was simply a matter of what could be demonstrated. The photographs were about to come out. Detective Flores placed the photographs on the table. Not the crime scene photographs, not yet. The photographs from the camera, the recovered ones, the ones forensic imaging had pulled back from a deleted memory card that Jodi Arias had dropped into a washing machine. Travis Alexander in the shower, photographed by Jodi. Time-stamped, date-stamped, June the 4th, 2008. The day Jodi Arias had just finished insisting in a recorded interrogation that she was nowhere near Mesa, Arizona. For a moment she said nothing. Then she said, "Are you sure those pictures aren't from another time?" Flores told her he was positive, that the card was intact, that the photographs were dated and time-stamped to the day Travis died, that the photographs showed Jodi in Travis's bedroom, that they were explicit, that they were unambiguous, that there was no version of this where it wasn't her. "Are you sure it's me?" This is the moment. This is the moment where, if you watch the footage, you can see something shift in the room, not dramatically, not explosively, just a quiet, almost imperceptible recalibration as Jodi Arias begins to understand that the wall she has been leaning on is not a wall at all. Flores told her about the DNA, her blood at the crime scene, her blood mixed with Travis's blood, her hair, her bloody palm print on the wall outside the bathroom. He told her it was over. Not as a threat, as a fact. You either had blood on your hand and touched the wall, or there was blood on the wall and you touched it. And Jodi Arias, surrounded by photographs, by forensic evidence, by a detective who had spent 41 days building a case she could not dismantle, looked at him and said, "Could it have been my blood from before?" Flores told her he wanted to show her photographs of Travis. Part of her, she admitted, didn't want to see them. Why, he asked. She said she didn't want to remember. Then she said, "There's a morbid curiosity." He showed her the accidental photograph, the one with the foot, the one taken as she kicked the camera while moving the body. He told her it was her foot, her jeans. She looked at it. "That is not my foot." She looked at it again. "I couldn't even recognize Travis, I've been gone so long." Detective Flores leaned forward. "There is no doubt in my mind that you were there, there is no doubt in my mind that you did this. None. I want to know why, it's killing me inside that I don't know why." And Jodi Arias, faced with photographs, with DNA, with a palm print, with a timeline that had collapsed entirely around her, leaned back. And said, "I did not kill Travis, I just didn't." She held that position for the rest of the night, but tomorrow, Detective Flores would not be coming back alone. 16 hours later, Jodi Arias was returned to the interrogation room. This time Detective Flores was not there. Sitting across the table was Detective Rachel Blaney. And from the moment she opened her mouth, it was clear that whatever patience the previous day had offered, this day would not. Before getting into what Detective Blaney said, it is important to understand what was being attempted. The investigators had studied the footage from the day before. They had watched every second of Jodi's performance. They had analyzed the strategy she was running, the sweetness, the tangents, the Bible references, the carefully managed emotional register, and they had designed a response. Good cop, bad cop. Not the simplified version from television where one detective is warm and the other is a bully. The real version, the sophisticated version, where the first detective's role is to build just enough hope in the suspect's mind that they are still talking their way out of this, and the second detective's role is to destroy that hope completely, so that when the first detective returns, the suspect greets them like a lifeline. Detective Blaney was methodical in her demolition. She told Jodi directly, "There's no question in my mind or any other investigator's mind that you were the person who took Travis's life." She named the choice Jodi had, not a legal choice, a narrative choice. Did she want to be remembered as a cold-blooded murderer or as someone who got caught up in circumstances that spiraled out of control? The media, Blaney told her, would be coming, and the picture that got painted of Jodi Arias would be determined by what she said or didn't say in this room. She told Jodi that her denial, her continued, polished, performative denial, looked exactly like the cold-blooded killer she claimed she wasn't. She told her that every time Jodi talked about money or her appearance or peripheral details that had nothing to do with the man who was dead, it made her look like someone who simply did not care. "I don't hear anything about Travis," Blaney said, "unless I specifically ask. How do you think that looks?" Jodi tried to respond, tried to launch into one of the digressions that had served her so well the day before, and Blaney shut it down. "Hard. You are not grasping the reality here, Jodi." The calculated cruelty of this approach, executed not with anger but with flat, clinical certainty, is something extraordinary to witness. Because Jodi Arias had spent her entire adult life weaponizing her sweetness. She had used her gentle persona to control rooms, deflect criticism, and make herself untouchable. Detective Blaney simply refused to be touched. And that, for a person like Jodi Arias, was the most destabilizing thing anyone had ever done to her. Detective Blaney asked Jodi, for the fifth time, whether she would prefer to speak with Detective Flores instead. For the first 4 times, Jodi had deflected. On the 5th, she said yes. And here is where the strategy reveals its full elegance. Because Jodi Arias believed genuinely in this moment that asking for Flores was her idea, that she had weighed the options and made a choice, that she was exercising some small measure of agency in a situation that had otherwise stripped her of all of it. She was not. Every element of what had just happened, the 16 hours in a cell, the return to the room, the voice recorder prominently placed on the table as a prop to signal that Blaney was the enemy, the relentless psychological pressure, had been designed to produce exactly this moment. She had been steered directly into it. Flores returned, the voice recorder went off, the tone shifted completely. He asked how she was doing. She said it didn't matter how she was doing. What mattered, she told him, was how Travis's family were doing. And then, in one of the more revealing moments of the entire interrogation, Jodi Arias asked to see the photographs of Travis. Not the photographs from before the attack. The photographs from after. She said it might give her asterisk closure, that she knew it was morbid, that she probably didn't deserve closure. Flores declined to show them. What followed was a long silence, then a longer one, then Flores asking in the quietest possible way the questions that had been building for 2 days. "Why were you there that day? Did you miss him? Should I be looking for somebody else? Are you protecting somebody?" And Jodi Arias, after hours of performance, after one night in a cell, after 16 hours of being systematically dismantled by a detective who had refused to be charmed, began to speak. Not a confession. Something far more interesting. She told him it was all asterisk really blurry, that she remembered being in the bathroom, that she heard a loud bang, that she thought she had been knocked out, that when she came to there were 2 people in the room. One man. One woman. Both masked. Travis had been attacked, she said. She had tried to help him, She had rushed at the woman with the knife. She had tried to pull Travis to safety. He had told her he couldn't feel his legs. The male attacker had gone through her wallet, found her car registration, told her that if she ever said a word, they would do to her family what they had done to Travis. It was the most elaborate, the most detailed, the most thoroughly constructed lie that Detective Flores had ever heard in his career. He told her he didn't believe a single word of it. January 2, 2013. 4 years, 6 months, and 2 days after Travis Alexander was murdered in his Mesa, Arizona home, Jodi and Arias walked into a Maricopa County courtroom and sat down at the defendant's table. By this point, the story had changed 3 times. Story 1, I wasn't there. Story 2, I was there but 2 masked intruders killed Travis and they threatened my family. Story 3, the one her defense attorneys were about to present to a jury, was something else entirely. Story 3 was, I was there, I did it, but I had no choice. The defense's opening statement lasted hours. And it was, in its own way, a masterpiece of narrative reframing. They began with an acknowledgement, clean, deliberate, designed to take the wind out of the prosecution's sails. Yes, Jodi had lied. Yes, her stories had changed. Yes, she had not always been truthful with police. But she had been scared, she had been panicked, she had no experience of interrogation. And her fear, her very human, very understandable fear, had led her to say things that weren't true. Now finally, the jury would hear the truth. The truth, according to the defense, was this. Travis Alexander was not the man his public image suggested. Behind the Mormon faith, behind the motivational speaking, behind the warm charisma and the community standing, Travis Alexander was a man dealing with profound sexual dysfunction. A man who had found in Jodi Arias a person he could use, control, and manipulate for his own needs, while maintaining his pristine reputation in front of everyone who admired him. They said he was physically violent, that he had rage episodes, sudden, explosive, triggered by almost nothing. They said he had directed Jodi to act out sexual fantasies. They said she had walked in on him looking at images of children on his computer and said nothing, stayed with him because she believed he was fighting the urge and that her presence helped him remain tethered to normality. That was the story. A victim so afraid of the man she loved that she stayed. A woman so psychologically dominated that she could not leave. And then, on June 4, 2008, a woman who finally snapped accidentally in a moment of pure terror when the only alternative was death. The prosecution's opening was considerably shorter. It was also considerably more precise. The prosecutor, Juan Martinez, a man who would become as famous as the case itself, told the jury exactly what Jodi Arias had done in clinical, unapologetic sequence. And then he told them something that cut through every layer of narrative the defense had just constructed. The person who committed this killing sits in court today. He paused. She rewarded that love for Travis Victor Alexander by sticking a knife in his chest. Jodi Arias spent 18 days on the witness stand. 18 days. This was, by any measurement, an extraordinary decision. Most defense attorneys in a case with this much physical evidence, with this much forensic certainty, with this much recorded interrogation footage, with 3 separate public stories already in the record, would not put their client on the stand at all. But Jodi Arias wanted to testify. And her attorneys, whether because they believed in her abilities or because they had run out of better options, let her. What followed was one of the most remarkable demonstrations of controlled, rehearsed performance that any American courtroom had ever witnessed. When the questions were coming from her own defense team, when she knew exactly what was coming, when she had had years to prepare every answer, Jodi Arias was extraordinary. She was calm, precise, emotionally calibrated. She could cry on demand and stop on demand. She could express remorse and then pull it back when the register called for something colder. She could be soft. She could be articulate. She could make a jury feel in the right moments a flash of genuine sympathy. She had, in 4.5 years, rehearsed this performance until it was seamless. She described Travis's alleged abuse with careful, layered detail. She described her state of mind on June 4th with the language of terror and dissociation. She described the moment she dropped the camera, how Travis lunged at her, how he picked her up off the ground with enough force that her feet left the floor, how she ran down the hallway, how she found the gun. She described shooting him, accidentally. She described how the fog rolled in, how the trauma of the moment caused a complete memory blackout, how she came to her senses outside the house in her car with no clear recollection of anything that had happened in between. She described the 27 stab wounds, the cut throat, the gunshot to the face, as events she could not remember committing. Engagement cue narrator flat and steady. There was also the matter of Travis Alexander's alleged pedophilia. Jodi testified that she had walked in on Travis looking at images of children on his computer. And she explained, with the particular kind of logic that only makes sense if you refuse to examine it too carefully, that she had stayed with him because she believed his attraction to adult women helped him suppress his darker impulses. She said he had asked her to wear children's underwear during sex, Spider-Man underwear specifically. She offered a theory for why. There was a child he was close with that really liked Spider-Man. Travis Alexander was not in the courtroom to deny any of it. He had been dead for 4.5 years. And Jodi Arias had used every one of them. Juan Martinez cross-examined Jodi Arias for days. And his approach was unlike anything the defense had prepared for. He did not attack the narrative directly. He did not stand up and tell the jury that Jodi Arias was lying. They already suspected as much. He did not make speeches. He did not grandstand. He asked questions. Short, precise, relentless questions, each one a single step in a staircase that he had already built in its entirety, leading to a destination only he could see. He started with the first interrogation, with the voluntary offer to help. He played the clip. That's not true, is it? Jodi, it depends on what help means. Yes or no, were you there to tell the truth? No. He moved through the changing stories, through the cell phone records, through the timeline of the road trip, through each version of events methodically, placing each one on the record before dismantling it. And then he got to the 62 seconds. This was the cross-examination sequence that legal scholars and true crime analysts would talk about for years. Because Juan Martinez's argument was not complicated, it was elegant, and it was devastating precisely because its devastation came from the simplest possible place, mathematics. He walked Jodi through her own testimony, step by step, in her own words. He asked her to confirm each element of her account. Travis got angry when the camera dropped. He stepped out of the shower. He body slammed her to the floor. She rolled away and ran down the hallway. She went into the closet and grabbed the gun. She backed into the bathroom. He lunged at her. The gun went off. He fell. He threatened her. The fog rolled in. And somewhere in that fog, she also went and found a knife. A knife she didn't have in her hand when she fired the gun, a knife she had no memory of picking up, a knife she had used to inflict 27 separate stab wounds. And then he showed her the timestamps. Exhibit 161, 5:31 and 14 seconds. Exhibit 162, 5:32 and 16 seconds. 1 minute and 2 seconds. All of that in 62 seconds. The body slam, the hallway, the closet, the gun, the bathroom, the shot, the struggle. The knife found somewhere from somewhere, and 27 wounds delivered to a grown man trying to survive. All of it. 62 seconds. Martinez asked her, "Isn't it impossible for the killing to have happened in that manner?" Jodi said no. He asked her again. She deflected, she parsed. She split hairs about whether Travis said the words asterisk before or after she broke free, as though the precise timing of a sentence could explain where a knife materialized from in 62 seconds. The jury watched her do it. All 12 of them. Before the verdict was read, Jodi Arias gave an interview. She had given many interviews throughout the trial. She had spoken to national media. She had given access to cameras. She had performed, for anyone willing to point a lens at her, the same character she had been maintaining since the day she was arrested. In this particular interview, recorded before the jury had returned, she looked directly at the camera and said, "No jury will convict me." She said, "Because I'm innocent." She said, "You can mark my words on that one." The prosecutor, Juan Martinez, would later ask the jury to mark those words too, right alongside the guilty verdict. On May 8, 2013, After 15 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom was silent as the foreperson stood. We, the jury, duly empaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths do find the defendant, as to count 1 first-degree murder, guilty. 5 jurors found premeditated murder. 7 found both premeditated murder and felony murder. Jodi Arias sat at the defense table. Her expression, those who were there would later describe, was difficult to read. Not shock, not collapse, something more interior than that. A woman doing very rapid internal calculations about what came next. In a post-verdict interview conducted almost immediately in the corridor outside the courtroom, a reporter asked about her thoughts. She said she felt blank, overwhelmed, that she needed to take things a day at a time. She was asked whether she had avoided eye contact with Travis's family during the proceedings. She said, "I typically avoided eye contact." She said, "When I see their faces, I see Travis." And then, with absolute sincerity, with the same practiced composure that had characterized everything she had said for 5 years, she said, "I see the man that abused me." Jodi Arias was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is currently housed at the Arizona State Prison Complex. She maintains her innocence to this day. She maintains that Travis Alexander abused her. She maintains that she acted in self-defense. And she maintains, as she has maintained since the moment she sat in that interrogation room and placed her head on a table to pretend she was sleeping, the character, the performance, the soft-spoken, sweet-natured, God-fearing persona that she constructed and has never once abandoned. The difference is that now she maintains it in a prison cell. If you made it to the end of this story, drop a comment below. Tell us, at what moment did you know? At what moment, watching Jodi, did you see through it? Because there is always a moment. And on this channel, finding that moment is exactly what we do. I'm your host, this has been Time with X. The Wrath of Jodi.